Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us tonight at the Millennium Stage. Now, please welcome Kennedy Center Senior Vice President for Education, Mario Rosero.
Good evening. How's everyone doing tonight? Great. Thanks for joining us. This is actually a very special day. You may or may not know that this is the 46th birthday of the Kennedy Center. We opened 46 years ago, so it's a really special day for us. Additionally, this year has been a year where we celebrated and honored President Kennedy, our namesake, because it was his 100th birthday at the end of May. And when we reflect back on his legacy, what we really pulled out from his work were what we call these JFK ideals, words of courage, justice, freedom, gratitude, service. And we think about how artists live up to those ideals every day. And so 2 years in a row now, we've started a program that's called the Citizen Artist Fellows. And this program recognizes artists all across the country who really use their artistic powers to impact communities, both small and large. And the citizen artists that are nominated and that are chosen really live up to those JFK ideals, and we're really proud of them. So this weekend, we're thrilled that we're hosting this year's cohort for a 3-day retreat. And as part of their learning and conversation, we're also thrilled that we can feature them and their artwork and some performance. So it's my great pleasure to introduce and welcome 2 of them that are on stage with me tonight. So from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, we have Michelle Angela Ortiz. Michelle, thank you for joining us. And from New York City, we have Ekene Ijeoma. Ekene, thanks for being here. And both of these artists work in an interdisciplinary fashion, right? And so they're going to speak and show some of their work, and we're just really excited that we can welcome them to the center, and hopefully you have a chance to meet some of their fellows that are out in the audience tonight. So a little shout out to the other citizen artists that are out in the audience. So enjoy your evening. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. All right. So it's so great to be here and to be sharing my work with all of you today. I am also really happy to be presenting here with Ekene and reuniting with the Citizen Artist Fellows. It's really great to have a break from producing and working to then having really important conversations that then feeds and inspires the work that we're doing. I'm also a little raspy, so bear with me with my voice, but I'm so happy to be here, so thank you. I am going to be sharing one of my projects called Familias Separadas, and I just wanted to add that this project is one of many from the work that I've been doing for the past 18 years as a visual artist, a community arts educator, and really working with communities and finding ways to really amplify the voices of the communities in different public spaces. So I'll be tapping onto some of those things as I move forward with the presentation. So Familias Separadas is a project that focuses on the stories of families that have been affected by deportations in Philadelphia. And the main goal of the project was to shift the focus from the statistics and numbers of deportations to see the father, mother, brother that has been torn apart by, from their families. For over a year and a half, I worked with community members from Juntos, a local immigrant rights organization in South Philadelphia, and I conducted workshops and interviews showcasing stories of 5 families. This is one detail of one of the pieces of the original piece, which is 18 by 18 inches that was then blown up to 18 feet, which you will see in a minute. Each story was depicted through temporary site-specific public artworks in different locations in the city. So the locations included City Hall, this is the piece in City Hall, Love Park, 9th Street Market, 6th and Tasker, and the Immigration Customs Enforcement Building on 16th and Callowhill. So as I worked with Familias Separadas, I was invited by curator Pedro Alonso through the Mural Arts Program, which is a nonprofit arts organization in Philadelphia that's been around for over 30 years. Philadelphia has the largest number of murals, public art murals, in the city and actually in the nation, and that is where I live. These pieces that I'm about to show was part of a larger citywide exhibit that included other artists like JR, Swoon, Shepard Fairey, and each one of us presented different topics and different issues and worked with various different communities in Philadelphia. So connecting my project to open source, Familias Separadas started a year and a half before being a part of open source, the open source exhibit. I was able to expand the opportunities to showcase my stories on a larger and more visible platform in the city. This artwork depicts the portrait of Maria and her daughter, and the artwork was placed on what we call is the Campus Rose in Philadelphia. It was created by architect Edmund Bacon, and that's also where the statue of William Penn stands. So for anyone who has visited Philadelphia or sees pictures of Philadelphia, there's this big statue of William Penn in the center of a city, and that is where that is looming over the piece of Maria and her daughter. The compass also marks the center of the city. It's where north, south, east, and west meet, and it serves as a symbol of migration and its connection to Maria's story, as well as to many immigrant families like my own searching for a new life. Maria's son sits next to the words, Eres mi todo, which translates to, you are my everything. There are the handwritten words from a letter sent by Jose, Maria's husband, while being incarcerated in California. Each site had an audio clip of the family members sharing a moment of their story. So if we could play that audio clip, please.
Y es algo muy difícil porque no me puedo ir y dejar aquí una parte de mí y irme por estar con mi esposo y con los otros niños, porque es algo muy difícil. Y mi esposo José creo que lo sabe y lo tiene bien claro, porque él me lo dijo que hay veces él piensa que él y yo no volveremos a estar juntos porque nuestros hijos nos van a separar. Y él me lo ha dicho que no importa, que si yo no regreso, que no importa, que yo me puedo quedar aquí, porque él sabe muy bien que mis otros hijos pues ya están grandes y ellos no quieren volver. Y él me dice, pues es una decisión que tendrías que tomar, o tus hijos o yo. Y es muy claro que tú no vas a dejar a tus hijos y siempre vas a estar con ellos. Dice, entonces yo salgo sobrando y pues ahora sí toma la decisión correcta.
So as we share narratives, and this is one thing that we've all talked about earlier today with the Citizen Artist Fellows, the importance of artists sharing narratives and how important it is to also hear the voice of the community member. Maria is a very quiet person. Because her husband was deported, there was a process for me to be able to connect with her and to be able to establish trust for her to be able to share her story. And the other thing is that since Maria is a very quiet person, she would not be here standing on the podium. So the audio serves as a way of being able to hear her voice and hear her story. What she shares in her story is that she's trying to make a decision whether to stay and raise her 5 children in Philadelphia now that she's a single mother, or bring her family to be reunited with her husband who was deported back to Mexico. Her husband, which I really want to talk about too, is that when we think about mass incarceration, it's very often that we forget or we make a really clear separation of the issues related to detention and deportation. And so what I would like to say is that it's all part of the same system. Jose served a 3-year jail sentence in California and then was deported back to Mexico. So it was very difficult for him to see his family, for his children to see his family. And also he was detained for those 3 years instead of being immediately deported back. Maria still continues to live in Philadelphia with her 5 children. In 2013, 94% of all deportations were men, forcing many women like Maria to become single mothers. And it's driving immigrant communities into deeper into poverty. Through these works, I present ways for people to try to understand the root causes of immigration. And Philadelphia is believed to have a total of 50,000 undocumented individuals living in our city. Many undocumented immigrants are fleeing their homelands due to violence and conflict, oftentimes conflict initiated by U.S. interests or lack of economic security due to U.S. economic policies forced upon Latin American countries. So this is known as forced migration. You see this in Honduras, you see this in El Salvador, you see this happening in Mexico. Suyapa proudly wears this gold necklace that you see on the image. She proudly wears this gold necklace on her chest. It's a memory of her oldest daughter that she carries with her. Suyapa left Honduras fleeing violence, and she crossed the border with her 2 youngest daughters, was detained in Texas, and is now fighting her deportation proceedings in Philadelphia. This image of Suyapa's necklace stands in close proximity to Robert Indiana's Love statue. This is another a landmark, and when we think about public space, the importance of being able to put these pieces, not just in City Hall and Love Park, the reasoning for using these very public spaces where very often people come and take selfies at the Love Park statue when they're coming to visit Philadelphia, and to put it in these very open public spaces instead of in the communities or in where the neighborhoods where the communities reside, was definitely to get another audience to come and really connect and ask questions about this piece, and to really think about what happens to love in the midst of immigration, what happens to love when you're forced to leave. This is actually my neighborhood in Philadelphia on the 9th Street Market. The 9th Street Market is the oldest open-air market in the US. So let me see if I use this little snazzy thing. No, it's not working. Here we go. So here is where there's a lot of outdoor vendors. How many of you seen the Rocky movie? Okay, so you know that part where he's like running down and then the kids start chasing him down the street? That was filmed on the street as he's going to the art museum. So the Italian, so what's interesting about the market is that it has been created by immigrant communities way back. It was first Jewish and Irish immigrants. Then 100 years later, 100 years ago, it was the Italian immigrants that came and began to form a place, right? And so how important it is to have ownership of place, of space and place, right? Especially when you're pushed away, you're discriminated against. And it is here in this neighborhood where my parents decided to have our home and where I was raised and where I continue to live. And I think it's also a sense of having this open air market that is a memory of home when you're so far away from home. And since the past, I would say within the past 18 years, there's been an influx of Central American and Mexican immigrants that have now revitalized the market, where there have been many storefronts that were closed and now have been revitalized by the community. So the intersection is where the majority of the newly arrived Mexican and Central American immigrants have arrived, but also there is a gap, there is segregation. So although there is a common thread, a common story of our immigrant experience, there is a really stark difference of where you see Cruz's face right here on the intersection, and on this end, which is the further part of the market. And so the majority of the Mexican and Central American vendors are on this end, and the majority of the Italian vendors are on the bottom end. So although there's a shared common immigrant experience, as I mentioned, there is a separation and there is discrimination against the newly arrived immigrants, which is really interesting because you're dealing with second and third generation Italian children, right? Italian immigrants that are descendants of immigrants that have forgotten their grandparents' stories or their great-grandparents' stories. And so the cycle of racism and discrimination still exists. So this was my way of being able to place the image of Cruz, which I'll talk about in a second, as a way to talk about that separation, and but also to reflect on his story and how it connects with many of the stories of the Italian families that reside. This is the intersection where Cruz rides his bicycle every day to work. And due to financial needs, Cruz decided to leave his home in Mexico at the age of 14, when he started working. He had worked hard for 20 plus years in the United States. And while working one day, he was detained by ICE and was sent home with a probation bracelet. He had to wear the bracelet for 4 months and could only leave the house for 12 hours. Every 2 weeks, ICE agents would search his house, and he had to report himself for 1 full year to their offices. Despite making up only 75% of undocumented immigrants in the US, Latinos represent 97% of immigrants that are deported. So this criminalization of Latinos has created a deportation machine that profits off the detention and deportation of the immigrant community. The use of ankle bracelets, as what Cruz had to experience in the immigration system, is an example of how private businesses rely on the deportation machine to thrive. So private businesses are contracted by ICE to maintain and monitor immigrants on ankle bracelets. So the more people detained and deported, the more money these private businesses make. Cruz's portrait was chalk sprayed onto the ground using 2 gigantic stencils that I created on the asphalt on this intersection. And the pedestrians and the traffic slowly wear away his image on the street. In his interview, he speaks about how the city was a symbol of freedom, and now it feels more like a prison. The intention of having each one of these pieces be ephemeral, temporary, was also a reflection of what happens when we see a striking image like this, and what happens when it's then washed away. What happens to that individual that has contributed to the society of our city and all of a sudden is no longer there because of deportation. The Immigration Customs Enforcement Building, this image here, is located on 16th and Callow Hill. This is the first step of the process of deportation and where families are first detained. This is where Cruz was detained. The mayor of Philadelphia reinstated a law that police cannot collaborate with ICE, meaning that if someone is undocumented and arrested for a minor crime, the police cannot call ICE so that they can start the process of deportation. That's one small step of becoming a sanctuary city, but we're not there yet. This ICE building has jurisdiction in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and West Virginia. And this ICE office has made, just within the past year, 356 non-criminal arrests, which is 6 times as many as during the same period in 2016. And when I talk about non-criminal arrest, if you are convicted of a federal crime and you're undocumented, that's immediate deportation. But there's been non-criminal arrests that are not to that gravity, but more and more deportations are being processed because of these small minor crimes, which was not the issue a few years ago. So at this site, we created an installation on the street. So I want to just point this out here. So right here on this area, this is where we did the installation. I'm about to show the video. And it's a time-lapse video of me and 30 volunteers who are undocumented, most of them undocumented families, allies, that we came together and placed a 90-foot-long stencil with the words of an undocumented mother I won't say much so you can see the video first, and then I'll share a little bit more.
ICE, water frozen solid. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. ICE, el hielo.
Eva pasando el trapo sobre la mesa y está cuidando que todo brille como una perla. Cuando llegue la patrona, que no se vuelva a quejar, no sea cosa que la acuse de ilegal. José atiende los jardines, parecen de Disneyland. Maneja una troca vieja sin la licencia. No importa si fue taxista allá en su tierra natal. Eso no cuenta para el tío Sam. El hielo anda suelto por esas calles. Nunca se sabe cuándo nos va a tocar. Lloran los niños, lloran a la salida. Lloran al ver que no llegará mamá. Uno se queda aquí, otro se queda allá. Eso pasa por salir a trabajar.
So the words of Ana, thank you. And I just want to share, that evening was such a magical moment because we were installing the piece, the families were there. It was such a magical moment because of the fact that the building represents so much fear for the families that that came to participate on this, in this installation, and for them to stand there fearless as we install the words of Ana, who's an undocumented mother. She was detained also at the Berks Detention Center, which is the closest family detention center, family prison that's near Philadelphia. There's 3 of them in the country, and we have 1 of them in Pennsylvania. And how incredible it was to have that moment, to have everyone come together and place the words of Ana as the ICE agents looked down on us. And we had everyone together working together. So this piece was up for about a month. And it's also placed at the entry and exit point of where a lot of the actually families that are detained, family members that are detained inside the ICE building, they're then sent off to other prisons or jails. So as they're transporting, not just the ICE agents, but the family members who are detained are able to see this message during the duration of the project. So, I'm looking at my time. So I will be continuing the Familias Separadas project I've just became a Rauschenberg Artist as Activist Fellow, and through that fellowship I'll be continuing to do this work for the next 2 years, but focusing my work with the Berks Detention Center and with families that have been detained there. There have been families, babies as young as 9 weeks old, to teenagers that have been detained with their mothers, some for more than 600 days, close to 2 years, and others for several months. The long-term families, just recently, 4 of them were released And I have been visiting the mothers that have been struggling and fighting for their freedom. And so I just wanted to add 2 notes. So this is a quick preview. This is the first time the public is seeing this. This piece is actually part of Monument Lab, which is another citywide exhibition. I am creating an animated projection based on the stories of 2 mothers that were detained at the Berks Detention Center, were just released last week. The story will unfold as one of the mothers will be reading the story, so you'll be able to hear her voice, and it'll be projected on the gates of City Hall in Philadelphia. It'll run from September through November. And I just wanted to add this because the 2 mothers are finally free, along with their 4- and 7-year-old sons. And it was a beautiful moment because it was a moment for my child to finally play with one of the mother's sons together. And I think it's also being reflective is that as we tear down monuments, it's important to also tear down the systems that continue to oppress immigrant and communities of color within our country. And that we build new monuments that record, reclaim, honor, and elevate our stories and the stories of our communities that connect us to our humanity. Thank you. Go. Heather, I gotta high five you, and then I'm getting off stage. And now, Ekene.
Wait, no, wait. Fine. Hello, everyone. Slides. Okay, well, anyways, I don't need a slide. So my name's Ekene Ijeoma, and I want to start by asking everyone to stand up with me. And I want you to do 3 things. First, I want you to look at the person next to you. And I want you to repeat after me. Don't look at me, look at them. And say, I see you. I value you. And I acknowledge you. Now hug. All right. All right, you can sit down, that's fine. So I was thinking about what it means to be a citizen now and to be a citizen artist. And why is it just a citizen? Can it be an immigrant artist? Can we be citizens? Can we just be concerned residents? Can we just be concerned artists? And as concerned artists, when we see things, we can also say things. I'm going to skip the next part, and I'm just going to say, when I see something, I say something, and I make art. And I think all of us as citizen artists, we went into the world and into our communities, and we saw something that we wanted to change, and the way for us to say something about it was to make artwork. For some of us made organizations, and it's either one. So I'm both an artist and a technologist, and I sort of had 2 ways of seeing the world. One is through photography, looking at subjects, so people, objects, and things like that. Another way is as a technologist, looking at data and looking at systems. And these systems, a lot of times, are affecting those subjects that I see in my photography. So in my work, I'm always trying to bridge the gap between facts and feelings. The feelings evoked in photography and the facts revealed in data visualization. So this is a map. It's a map of refugee data over the last 40 years from 1975 to 2013. And this is one of the first times throughout this project is when I think I became a citizen artist. Looking at this map and also looking at this image that was published in 1984, a few months before I was born in June, and sort of thinking about what are we not seeing in this image and what are we seeing in this data. What we're not seeing is the millions of other refugees that also had to flee their countries that same year. And so then I started thinking about, well, how can I use data to look outside the frames of photography and expose all the other refugees that you can't see in that photo. So in 2014, well, actually we started working on this. It took a year of nights and weekends in between commercial work. But in that year, we created this map called the Refugee Project, which shows the last 40 years of refugee migration starting from 1975 to 2015. And it's a map of circles, each sized by the number of refugees that originated from that country. But when you roll over that country, you can see where those refugees found asylum. We also wrote over 100 stories about the social political events that caused some of the largest migrations. And this is the first time that I saw that the art could bridge the gap between an underrepresented issue at the time, this was in 2014 before the European refugee crisis, and the news. So it's something I went on to try and do with all my other projects is I wanted to get these issues out into the news and design news, art news, architecture, and international news. After that, so the first project I forgot to mention, I collaborated with HyperAct, which is a social impact design studio in Brooklyn. And after that project, I went on to participate in a design hackathon that they did where I partnered with Fast Food Forward, which is now called Fight for 15. And this is another map which shows how impossible it is for low-wage workers in New York to find affordable housing. But I sort of wanted to challenge myself to create a more empathetic image than I did in the Refugee Project. So I took that map and I did a bunch of calculations, and I was able to make this 3D topographic map of New York City where the heights are based on affordability. So at the top you see the peaks, those are the most affordable places. Those are the areas where minimum wage workers can live. And that was my question. Where can low-wage workers live? Where can the people that service and build our cities, can they afford to live in the city that they're servicing and building? And then the next thing I did was I laser cut and assembled 500 pieces of acrylic to create an actual 3D physical map that you just saw in that rendering. And on the left side, you see it submerged in water to only show where you can live on minimum wage. And then on the right side, you see where you can live on higher wages. So this is a video of the making of. So what happened is after I poured dye in the water, so then you weren't able to see what was below the model, but you were only able to see what was above. And that's what sort of created those two images. Then I made a button with a display where you could push the button and raise the minimum wage 17 times. And as you push the button, the model raises out of the water to reveal all the wage islands that exist in between the islands of minimum wage and the islands of all of New York City as we know it. So after I went on to start creating more interventions. So what I would call the things that you saw before, those are all representations, and I try and do what I call sort of, I bring art and technology together to make contemporary representations and interventions. So this is a photo in a park in New York City, and everyone's looking down at their phones, as you can see, and it's not just in parks, it's in a lot of spaces in New York City, a lot of the public spaces. And I felt like something needed to be done about that. Also, this is a map of all the crashes, injuries, and fatalities at every intersection in New York City. Some of them caused because of phone distraction and lack of street awareness. And I wanted to think of a way to sort of combat that. And also, I wanted to take that map that's about danger and sort of safety and sort of translate that to something that was about energy and awareness. So I made this thing called the energy score, which is the more crashes that happen at each intersection, the more energy that we should pour from our phones and back into the streets. So that could mean like saying hello or smiling at someone at every intersection in New York City. And so that same year, Google Creative Lab commissioned me to make this app, which I called Lookup. And I put those eyeballs in the back of the home screen to create an app that runs in the background of your phone, and as you near an intersection, these eyeballs pop up, and if you're in an app, it pops up a notification and tells you to look up. So it's about sort of creating spaces in the city at every intersection, creating spaces for these opportunities to sort of interact with our neighbors and interact with the people around us, as opposed to just texting at every intersection to just sort of, you know, watch time go by. More recently, this summer I was commissioned by a festival to make a piece around sort of well, New York City, I'll start by saying this. So this image is showing diversity in New York City. And as you can see, New York City, like DC, is one of the most segregated places, but also one of the most diverse. And so all these colors you see are all the different ethnicities and races in New York City, and how you can see how clustered they are. But New York City subways are where a lot of these different cultures come together, and that's where they intersect. But I thought that this sort of intersection of culture should happen more in our public spaces and plazas. And looking at this poll, it's very interesting because a poll can also bring people together. And what if I created a poll that when everyone connected it, say it used your body as a conductor, and you could hold on to one pole and I would hold on to another one, and then I myself, my body, using my body, would connect two things and activate something. So this summer I was commissioned to make an installation about that, and I hope this video works because this is the premiere. So, so yeah, this is another video, last video. Fingers crossed. All right. So that was it. Yeah, so I want to ask all the other fellows to come up, and I actually brought a part of Heartfelt with me, which was the last project I showed. And yeah, all of you, yeah. So I think if we put all our energy together that we'll be able to light this up, but we should just try it. So guess I'll be in the center.
Right. Yes.
Yeah,
Wait,
so
okay.
you guys can. Yeah. All right, now let's all hold hands. You gotta come back around though. Yeah, we gotta make the circle. All right, now watch this.
Should we go around the other way? Or
All right, fine. All right, here you go. All right, there you go. All right. That's it.
We have to stay for a question. Oh.
Yeah.
You good?
Yeah, so we see something and we make something. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I have a few minutes before the end of this presentation to take some questions from the audience for the artists. Any questions, anybody?
Hi, thank you so much. It's been really inspiring. I was wondering, did you two both, or did you go to formal art school for journey?
No, I went to design school, but it's a lot different from art school.
I did go to get my formal training from Moore College of Art and Design to have my bachelor's in fine arts. But I trained to be a painter. And that was really interesting because when I was going to school, success was determined by being represented by a gallery, a commercial gallery. So I really, at that time, just broke the mold in wanting to do work in public spaces. And I learned by being with other artists and working with different communities in that way.
Thank you.
Hello. In both of your presentations, you talked about commissions as one of the ways that you are able to actualize all the projects, all the works that you're working on. Could you talk a little bit more about that process of building relationships with different entities, whether it's cities and governments or people who are undocumented or everyday people in festivals? What does that look like?
Messy. I mean, especially, I mean, I don't work through a gallery either, so a lot of it is just sharing ideas with a lot of people, and it took, I had that, I think every single one of my ideas I've had for at least a year before I was able to get it commissioned. Like I had Heartfelt, I had that idea since I think last November. Look Up, I had that idea for a year before that. And also there was a lot of foresight in the work. So even I had Look Up about over a year, and it was released 3 days or about just a couple of weeks before Pokemon Go, which then everyone on the street was like this. And then the Refugee Project, like we did that, and we started that in 2013, released that in 2014, and then, you know, it came back in the media in 2015. So, yeah, but that wasn't commissioned. That was the first self-commissioned project we did. And then actually, it then sort of got supported by museums and the exhibitions that it was in. It was in 2 exhibitions last year, one at the Annenberg Space for Photography in LA, and then another one at the Neuberger Space for Photography. And it went on to be supported more by the arts than the organization that it came from. And then the other projects, they've just been I mean, from a tech company to a gallery to a festival, it's pretty diverse.
I think on my end with Familias Separadas, that project, you know, how I see it is that usually what happens is that one project gives me the idea for the next step. And so that kind of emerged from another project that I did, which I really worked on a year of applying for grants and doing some crowd funding. And so that project was Tiana Yaw, which was a large-scale mural where I had teens from Mexico City, the border towns in Mexico, and teens in Philadelphia create a collaborative mural representing their stories of immigration. So I went from like a year of looking for funding and having that pretty much on my own, 75% of securing funding for that project, which gave me a lot of flexibility, but it also took a long time to do. But when I thought of Familias Separadas, also I applied for different, both national and local foundations to support the work. And I think in terms of relationships or building relationships, because when we think about when we think about resources or what people can actually offer, I always think of it beyond than just the money. And so there are resources that the organizations that I partner with. So in the case of Familias Separadas, I had Juntos, who had been at that time doing work and still continues to do the work for over 10 years in the community. There's a sense of presence and trust and work that they've done that have organized the community to speak for themselves and to defend themselves and defend their human rights. Not just immigration rights. Immigration is a human rights issue. Being able to connect with some of the families, to have the youth participate in some of the workshops that I did for Familias Separadas, to be able to have another audience that is not just organizing, but sees how the art can play a role in their organizing efforts and how they could participate in another way beyond than just marching. And also the Mural Arts Program, which is a both city, they get some funding from the city of Philadelphia, but they also have large sponsors. And so by connecting with open source, it just gave me a bigger, it just was able to help me just expand my project in ways that would have taken me probably another year to find funding. And the advantage of having an organization that is connected and has a relationship with the city made it a little bit easier for me to connect with the streets commissioner and the mayor to be able to have permission to place that work onto the street, right? And that process was really important because I could have gone in guerrilla style, but I'm also bringing in all of the families that are undocumented And I have to be, it's my responsibility as an artist, as a convener, as a person that's trying to have folks come together to create this piece, that they're safe. And so by having, especially in front of the ICE building, because their status can lead them to becoming detained. So we had cops there, we had permission from the commissioner and permission from the mayor to be able to do that work on the ground.
Michelle and Ekene, thank you for sharing this amazing work with us. And I'm curious to know what some of the conversations we've been having today around citizen artistry is in how we're able to be advocates for the communities that we care about, and you both do that so beautifully. And I wonder, just to extend the conversation that you were, the point you were just making, Michelle, what are the pathways towards the kinds of policy changes that we'd like to see happen that affect the communities that we care about? And if we, I guess, what are the barriers that you see to artists having a seat at the table when it comes to conversation with policymakers? And I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think what I'm dealing with right now, and this is with the extension of Familias Separadas and working with the mothers at Berks, is that there's been I'm working with a coalition of activists, also lawyers, that have been pushing to shut down the Berks Detention Center. And the push has been also towards the governor, Tom Wolf, who has the power to shut down the center. And I think that in the history of the coalition, they've been able to present the stories of the mothers through writing campaigns, through having recently released mothers to come to the actions and speak to what's going on. I have been the first artist to come into the detention center and bring art supplies, which was really weird for the guards because they didn't know what to do with me. But also to really think about how do we, for me, and the mantra that I've had, this mantra has been even more strengthened after that ICE install, is that I want to create work that's both poetic and powerful. And so there are ways that we can say, shut down the Berks Detention Center. There's ways that we can say, no more deportations, but in a way that we're utilizing and amplifying the voices of the community in their own words, and having that be a phrase, an image, a symbol that resonates with everyone, right? And so when you come across the image of Maria and her daughter, it makes you stop. It makes you want to think about what's going on. While we had that installation and even afterwards, so many people would come and then begin to share their own immigration story or want to know more. And I think that there are ways to do that, and there's ways to still be active and push those policies in a way that are very, very creative. So the piece that is going up is going to be launched on Wednesday, which is the Monument to the Mothers at Berks. Is going to be really interesting because it's, again, on the gates of City Hall, but we will have an action where I'm actually creating a number of, I don't know how many paper flowers, but lots of them. And these paper flowers are going to spell out the word liberty, libertad in Spanish, and they're going to be laid at the gates of City Hall. And in conjunction, trying to work with the organizers to plan something so that it brings attention to the issue, also utilizing the art as a way to bring people together. And those folks that are coming to those workshops that I'll be holding at the Barnes Foundation in Philadelphia will have an opportunity to learn about what's going on at Berks, to be able to reflect and also send out a message back out to the world, right? But even if we think about the paper flower, and I think that that's really important, for me, it's also how do we utilize things that are tactile. So I love Ekene's work, and I love the fact, so playing with the phone or playing with these objects and how we can connect with one another. And so the use of the paper flowers, which is not a mural, it's not a painting, but it's something that I grew up doing with my grandmother, and it's something that's very familiar with the mothers inside. So that was another thing, like beyond pushing the policies, how can I create space or artwork that can then form as a way of healing for the mothers inside. So the mothers were like fed up to here with having to write another campaign letter to shut down the center and spending another day, month, year in the center. So me coming in and saying, hey, let's do paper flowers and let's write your messages and let's think about your life. Think about a moment that you were that you felt the most free. Think about if you were to write a letter to your son 10, 15 years from now, what would it say after being freed from this situation? So moving them away from their current moment and being able to offer other possibilities and another outlet. So the mothers inside, when they were detained, did a number of 15 flowers because I couldn't leave art supplies. I couldn't do painting with them. That was my way of having them do something tactile that they also identified and connected with too as children. And so it's bringing together this very maternal activity, but having it be used and support the actual organizing efforts of the coalition to shut down the center.
I think that's it. That's all we have time for. Can we get another applause for our citizen artists, please?